Thank you, everybody. Great to have you here today, and great to be joined by my distinguished colleagues, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Merkley, and Senator Klobuchar, and we will be joined by a number of others, but we wanted to get going on time here this morning. Today, every single member of the Senate Democratic Caucus is introducing the For the People Act. The contrast we are laying out for the American people could not be clearer. This is a historic day for our democracy, and it is not a day too soon. Our democracy is at a crisis point. Everyone knows it, the American people know it, and they are demanding that we do something about it. For far too long, our politics haven't worked for the people. They've worked for the powerful, they've worked for the wealthy, for the well-connected, for the 1%, and for the big corporations. Special interests rule, and the American people are shut out. If you've got any doubt about that fact, just look at the results on a couple of the key important issues, and there are many others than just these that I'm going to zip through here. Look at what this administration and the Republican Congress have produced or failed to produce. Look at the disconnect between what the American people overwhelmingly want and what they get from the political system. We all know the American people want affordable health care for every American. What do they get? Sabotage of their health care system, a court case where they're asking them to do away with the Affordable Care Act, and an action to stack the deck for Big Pharma. What do people want? Real and tangible action to fight climate change. What do they get? Cynical show votes from the majority leader, handouts to the big polluters, and an all-out assault on environmental protections. And the American people want comprehensive immigration reform. And what do we get? A 35-day government shutdown to try and build a wasteful and ineffective border wall that does nothing to fix our broken immigration system. This isn't how democracy is supposed to work. The system is rigged. And to fix what ails our democracy, we've got to accurately diagnose the problem. Access to the ballot is too hard. Our House districts are gerrymandered beyond recognition. The ultra-wealthy and the powerful corporations try to buy elections with big money, while they hide behind dark money. And government officials use their office for personal gain. That all ends with this sweeping reform package. And the For the People Act puts power back into the hands of everyday Americans where it belongs. It answers the American people's call for reform, tackling three major areas to unrig the system: making it easier, not harder, to vote, ending the reign of big money, and making sure public servants are actually serving the public. Under Democratic leadership, the House of Representatives has swiftly passed this set of comprehensive reforms. Today, we are seizing their momentum and the momentum of the American people. Now the ball is in Senator McConnell's court. We know that the K Street lobbyists and the special interests and the big money donors are calling out the cavalry to defeat this bill. They're counting on their most loyal ally, Senator McConnell, to block this bill. The special interests are terrified of the For the People Act, and I think that means we've got ourselves a good bill. This should not be about Democrats versus Republicans. This is about people versus special interests, and it's at this time in particular that I have such fond memories of Senator McCain and where he would be on this issue. We need some Republicans like Senator McCain that would join us on this bill. In the meantime, I have a couple of questions for Senator McConnell. What are the majority leader and his colleagues against? Why are they against every eligible voter registering and voting? Why are the majority leader and his colleagues against taking the politics out of redistricting and drawing districts through independent and impartial commissions? What are the majority leader and his colleagues against? Why are they against unmasking dark money and showing the American people who's trying to buy their elections? Why are the majority leader and his colleagues against protecting our elections from foreign interference and bad actors? These aren't just our questions, folks. These are the questions of the American people, and I believe this will be one of the defining issues in our election next year, because you see the alignment right now. Every single Democrat is on this bill and fighting for it, believing in it, and wanting reform. And we don't have a Republican joining us in that effort. And with this, we've also been joined by all these members have worked many years on this reform package, and they're all going to speak in the order here of Senator Merkley, Senator Schumer. If we get Senator Schumer off the floor, he's here, right here. And Senator Klobuchar, Senator Durham, White House. Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'm delighted to be here, and Tom, thank you for your leadership on the For the People Act and reform and functioning of the Senate and of our democracy. The founding We the People vision of our Constitution has been corrupted by gerrymandering and dark money, voter suppression, and intimidation. We now have government by and for the powerful rather than government by and for the people. Today, we stand up together to end that corruption. If we fail, we will fail on health care. We will fail on housing. We will fail on education. We will fail on infrastructure and jobs. If we fail in this reform, we will fail to take on climate chaos, a threat that we must not fail on. In this bill, we take on gerrymandering by requiring independent commissions. We take on dark money through disclosure of all the funding that goes into the system, through honest ads. We take it on through small donor grants. We take on voting at 3 critical stages. The first stage of registration, we adopt automatic registration as pioneered by my home state of Oregon. We enable people to register over the internet, to do same-day registration. We take on early voting so everyone has a full opportunity to get to the polls. You have the right in this bill to vote by mail, another strategy engineered by the state of Oregon. And on Election Day, we end polling place predatory practices with polling place protections, making sure that polling places are clearly announced, appropriately located, and appropriately staffed. We know this last November 6th, what happened at the voting places. We saw strategies like in Georgia when registrations weren't processed, or in Ohio, where voting polls or voting lists were purged, or in North Dakota, where they sought to prevent Native Americans from voting, or in Iowa, where they established an ID strategy to keep college students from voting, and state after state after state. It was here that we honor Johnson, President Johnson, who said, "The vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man to break down injustice." Today we fight to break down injustice and to reestablish the vision, the we the people vision, the for the people vision of our Constitution. We have taken an oath to our Constitution. We must restore that vision, and we take a powerful stride to do that today. Thank you. And now I turn this over to our leader, Chuck Schumer.
Well, thank you. First, let me thank all of my colleagues, Senator Udall and Merkley, for their leadership. And this bill is multifaceted, and everyone here has had a significant input into a different part of this bill. The wellspring of our democracy, voting, equality, each person has the same amount of weight in that democracy, is at risk. What's happened is people of malign influence have figured out ways around the fundamental core principle of this democracy, which is each person's vote, each person's influence should be the same. Our soldiers died for this since the Revolution of 1776. People have marched for this and gotten beaten up and brutalized and even killed. And now, insidiously, these evil forces that seek to advantage special interests or a small few are gaining ground. Now, that's always happened. They always figure out ways to get around the core of democracy. And what we are doing is so American. It's restoring that democracy. It's finding ways that democracy is, pointing out ways that democracy is eroded and fixing it. And that's what the We the People Act does. I just find it stomach-curdling what people will do to deprive minorities of voting. And they explicitly say it, or of power. This idea that the First Amendment means that a multi-billionaire can put as much money into our political system as anyone else had nothing to do with the First Amendment until these right-wing think tanks thought that up. And unfortunately, a Supreme Court that's become much more political went along. All of the things we talk about in this bill are simply restorative of this grand democracy. We cannot let it erode. We cannot let it fade. We cannot continue to have people's faith that they have some say in how they're governed diminishes. So I really salute the authors. We'll ask our Republican colleagues, we're in the minority, but we're putting them on the defensive, whether it's health care or climate change or this, the root of it all. Where do they stand? Where do they stand on dark money cascading into our system? Where do they stand on making it easier, not harder, for people to exercise their right to vote? Where do they stand on cleaning up the swamp? Yes or no? And if you don't agree with us, what's your answer? They don't have one. They hide. We the people means they will hide no longer. And we will continue to be foot soldiers in this grand march to make this union more perfect.
Okay, excellent. All right.
That's because I didn't read this.
Okay, did you hear what he just said? He said, it's because I didn't read this. Anyway, that was wonderful. Thank you. And I want to thank Senator Merkley and Senator Udall. If for any other reason to celebrate Senator Udall's incredible career, we have to get this passed in the Senate. All right. So I am here as the ranking member of the Rules Committee and as someone who has taken on this issue for a long time, as someone who doesn't come from money but got into public office by raising money in small amounts. My first race I ran, they had a $100 limit in off-election years, $500 limit during the election years. And then I got here. And so when I am asked, like we were this morning, by these advocates for doing sensible things when it comes to gun legislation, mothers of kids that have been killed who know that the vast majority of people in this country are with us when it comes to background checks, why it isn't happened, this is the answer, right? Because our Constitution says that everyone has a vote. Well, that's not what's happening right now in America. The efforts to squelch the votes, the efforts to use dark money to try to stop common sense efforts. When you see the administration come out against the Affordable Care Act and say that people can get kicked off their insurance if they have a pre-existing condition, when those families are calling us, like they did yesterday and last night, yes, we tell them we'll do everything to fight. But the fundamental thing we can do to fight for the people of America is passing this bill. Because it literally, this dark money, the gerrymandering, the limits on voting is exactly why we're not able to move on climate change or gun legislation or doing something further to protect people's health care. So Minnesota had, once again, the highest rate of voting in the last election, guys. Sorry. Once again.
And your CEO headquarters.
Okay, well, we're going to say this, but mostly, which is interesting, yes, we're one of the highest per capita, but yet we also have the highest rate of voting. Why is that? We make it easier for people to vote. We have same-day registration. We do all kinds of things because our parties on both sides through time have valued the simple idea that people should have a say. So I'm very glad that my same-day registration provision is in here. The idea that we should register every kid when they turn 18 to vote across the country, a bill I've been leading for a few years, is in here. The Honest Ads Act, we started out with Senator Udall talking about John McCain. That's a bill that he and I introduced with Senator Warner last year that simply says, hey, social media companies, you got to abide by the same rules that newspapers and radio and TV do, which is to have disclaimers and disclosures so people know who's buying the ads and what they are. And then finally, election security, backup paper ballots, something that Senator Lankford and I and a number of others have been pushing for now for the last few years. We were stymied by the White House and Senator McConnell in getting a vote. That's in here. These are bipartisan provisions that are in this bill. So I am very excited about this effort, and I will end with where we began in 2018, which is that the people understand this now. They see the connection between the limits and the efforts to squelch them and their health care. My favorite ad of the last season was a woman named Angie Craig who ended up beating an incumbent Republican in the southern suburbs of the Twin Cities. And her best ad was an ad of people speaking in front of bales of hay. She has rural parts of her district as well, and their words were coming out of their mouths, but you couldn't hear what they were saying. And the point of the ad was, these special interests are stopping your voice from being heard. The solution is this bill. Thank you. With that, Senator Durbin.
I think we preface these remarks by bragging about our states. So Illinois leads the nation in pumpkin production. I just want to put that on the table.
I didn't think you were going to go toward the voting thing, but that's good.
History tells us the following. It takes a significant scandal to create significant political force for significant reform. So what do we do in a situation where we become so used to scandalous behavior in our political campaigns that there's just no outrage factor anymore? The people instead have become cynical about us, cynical about what we do for a living, cynical about our country and our government, and that's sad. The voting turnout in many places is still disappointing, despite our best efforts to bring out the vote, and I think it shows a certain skepticism, if not cynicism, about this process. If you ask people very basic question. Do you think campaigns are too long? Not only yes, but hell yes. When are you going to get off the television? Do you think that campaigns cost too much money? There are too many ads on TV? Well, certainly. They're overdoing it. I can't take it anymore. I knock on people's doors and they say, don't say a word. I don't want to hear another word about the campaign that's going on. You know, that to me is an indication that the people are fed up. One of the proposals that I've included in this bill is one that's been around for a long, long time. It was a time-honored solution for this issue a decade or 2 decades ago, public financing of campaigns. It's voluntary. It basically would change the contour of a campaign completely. When a candidate says, that's it, I'm going for small donors, I'm going to try to show that I have enough support locally in my state, for example, for senators, to become a viable candidate. At the end of the day, I can get matching funds if I get enough individual contributions. And under the bill that we're proposing here, get a break when it comes to radio and TV advertising at the end of the day as well. I think to me that is so radical an idea that it just might be acceptable to the American people. They would like to see a shorter campaign. They'd like to see less money spent, more time on debate and less time on social media. All of these things are part of what people are asking for. The question is, are we listening here on Capitol Hill? I'm glad the House of Representatives under Democratic leadership was not only listening but did something. The obvious question is Mitch McConnell listening? Are the Republicans listening? Or do they care? The American people know where we stand. Where do they stand?
The American people are mad. They're mad because they don't believe that Congress listens to them any longer. And the American people are right. Congress actually doesn't listen to them any longer. Statistical surveys have shown that the effect on Congress of the general public's views is zero. Congress listens to big special interests. And Congress listens to big special interests because big special interests have been given unlimited and unprecedented power. They have first the power to spend unlimited amounts of money. Now, who are you helping when you give the power to spend unlimited amounts of money in politics? You're helping the people who have unlimited money to spend and who want to spend it in politics. That is a very small group, and it is probably the least deserving group of that kind of power. Then you add to that that we allow them to spend that unlimited money anonymously, so that Americans can't even judge what the real story is, who the real actors are behind the masks. We see television ads from groups with silly names like Americans for Peace and Puppies and Prosperity, and you don't know who's behind it. And that degrades the system further and powers the special interests even further. And the most basic recognition that the average American has, but the Supreme Court obviously does not have at this point, is that when you give a big special interest the power to spend unlimited money and the power to spend unlimited dark money, you have also given them the power to threaten and promise to spend unlimited money and unlimited dark money. And those threats and those promises are always going to be private and secret and corrosive of democracy. So we absolutely have to get a handle on this. We absolutely have to shine a spotlight into this dark money bog that Washington has turned into. And I promise you, when I was a kid, I was a Foreign Service officer's kid. We lived in some pretty off-the-grid places. And if you went in the kitchen at night to get a glass of water and you turned on the lights, the cockroaches would scuttle for the corners. You turn on the Disclose Act, you put the light on all of this dirty, anonymous political spending, and you will see a lot of scuttling. And that scuttling will leave behind a better, a stronger, a more democratic, and a more honest America. Michael Bennett.
After that, I'm not sure. Or cockroach. It's such a privilege to be here with these folks who have been working on this for so long, leading the effort. And Tom, thank you for your leadership. And we're looking forward to your last 2 years here. I'm not looking forward to your leaving, but working with you. I used to, when I would land at Denver International Airport, having spent 4 days here, wish that I had a paper bag to wear over my head because I was so embarrassed about what was going on here. And then I wondered why anybody would want to work in a place that had a 9% approval rating. And it turns out there's an answer to that. If you think you've been sent here to dismantle the federal government for the benefit of these large interests that Sheldon Whitehouse was talking about, a 9% approval rating suits you just fine because you can then go home and say, see how terrible they are, see the fact that, America thinks that, we suck so badly that we're at a 9% approval rating. And the reality is America is angry at us because they know we're never working on their priorities. We're always working on someone else's priorities. And in the case of this Congress, what that means is we do nothing. Day after day after day on that floor across the hall, nothing happens. There are no votes taken almost, except for judges that Mitch McConnell is cranking through. But no work on health care, no work on climate, no work on reform. And the reason for that is because we are caught in a corruption of inaction. It's like what Senator Whitehouse said, they don't even need to spend the money, they can just threaten to spend the money. And that stops everything. It's hearings that aren't held and speeches that aren't given, bills that are not introduced in a bipartisan way, even though there's vast bipartisan support for this legislation in the country. Climate's the best example of that, but it's not the only example of that. Amy Klobuchar mentioned guns. 96% of the American people think the problem with our politics is there's too much money in it. Unfortunately, none of those people are on the Supreme Court of the United States, where they don't believe in this corruption of inaction that we have, where they don't believe that the appearance of corruption in our politics is causing people to lose faith in our democracy, but that is exactly what's happening. And our exercise in self-government is at risk as a result. And this bill contains a number of common sense reforms, from voting to the way campaigns are financed to gerrymandering, that will at least give the American people confidence that we hear them and somebody here is trying to respond to them, and that doing nothing for the sake of protecting special interests is unacceptable to them. I just want to close by making 2 points about Colorado. Now I know who our competition is because we were second last year in voter turnout. So we're coming after you, Minnesota. And the second, and by the way, the reason is we've made it easy for people to vote in a bipartisan way. And second, we also have adopted the idea of a bipartisan commission to end political gerrymandering in our state. And I'm very pleased that that's part of this legislation as well. Just as pleased that Chris Van Hollen from Maryland has been a big part of this effort too. So let me introduce you to him.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. And let me start by thanking Tom and all of our colleagues, Jeff and the whole team here, and all the folks in the room who are part of grassroots organizations who have been working on this democracy project for many years, and folks around the country who really want to take back our democracy, make sure we protect the integrity of our elections, and refresh our political process so it's one that works for people throughout the country rather than these big, powerful special interests. We've gotten to the shameful condition in America where one party tries to win elections by subtraction. They literally want to deny access to the polls of people who have the right to vote, instead of addition, which is something we should all be focused on, trying to get more people out to vote and participate in our democracy. But when you have people throwing up barriers, It makes it more difficult, which is why this bill tears down many of those barriers. This is the For the People Act. I think a lot of folks, they say for the people and by the people, but instead of BY for the people, they think it's BUY, the people. And those are all those special interests that are spending tens of millions of dollars out there, including more and more secret money in politics. As my colleague said, Sheldon and others, we see a growing number of people who want to hide what they're doing from the American people. They want to participate in our democracy and influence voters, but they don't want to tell voters who they are. And so part of this bill is a very simple proposition that voters have the right to know. Voters have a right to know who's spending gobs of money to try and influence their vote, rather than hiding in the shadows and the darkness. So we saw the spectacle just yesterday on the floor of the Senate, Mitch McConnell playing political games with climate change, again doing the bidding of the fossil fuel industry. The House quickly passed a bill on gun safety reform. Haven't had a vote on that. Over here, what are they scared of? NRA money. And of course, the House passed a bill very much like the one we're introducing today that gets to the root of the problem and tries to address the fundamentals of our democracy. So we are going to continue to call on the Republican leader to bring this bill up, but we understand full well that in order to get this done, we need to take this issue to the country and to the grassroots, and we know the people are on our side on this issue. So I have great confidence that justice will prevail in the end, but we're going to have a lot of work to do to get there. So I want to thank my colleagues for helping make that possible.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. I think we're ready for a little Q&A. Please go ahead.
Off-topic question.
Off topic?
Yes.
Just let's stay on topic. We love this topic, okay? Yeah. What?
I think you'll like this one. And
Okay.
it is, can you guys respond to Betsy DeVos and the fact that her budget completely cuts funding for Special Olympics and also cuts funding for special education? Yeah.
Okay. Right. That's a good off-topic question. It's completely outrageous. We have had the Special Olympics in Minnesota. I've seen these kids. I've seen the twinkle in their eye. Both Michael Bennett and I have been co-chairs along with a number of Republican senators of the Olympics caucus, and see the value when it comes to Special Olympics. I'm shocked because we have a administration that likes to talk about their support for the disability community, and then you see something outrageous like this. So I think it is just, once again, what we see is not putting the people first. It was the disability community, as we all know, that really stood up against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act in a very big way. I still remember being in a small town parade with a mom with a stroller, and she said, "This is what a pre-existing condition looks like." And she pointed to her 2-year-old who had Down syndrome. And she said, "I will do anything to fight for him." So this community stood up for their own people, and now this administration is responding like this. It's wrong, and it's another reason we need to pass this bill.
If I could just quickly say on the special ed cuts. On the special ed cuts, Congress did the right thing back in the 1970s when we said every child, including every child with a disability, has the right to a full education. As of now, Congress is way behind on making good on its promise of a 40% share of the costs of IDEA, under IDEA. And just yesterday, Senator Roberts and I introduced a bipartisan bill, which we hope will have support to put the federal government finally on a path to fully fund its obligations under IDEA. And unfortunately, this administration, whether it's cutting Special Olympics or what they're doing on special education, is going in the other direction.
Yeah. And on the positive side of this, 3 of us here, are the 2 on this left-hand side, are appropriators. You see these kinds of cuts in appropriation, they come up, they're dead on arrival. I mean, we've increased money to the arts, we've increased money all across the board for many, many programs. So Congress is, when it comes to some of these spending decisions that are so out there, Congress is really making a difference on them.
And just to relate it to, because it's so on topic again, these people with disabilities, they don't have the big money, okay? I always think about, Paul Wellstone would always talk about kids that can't write the campaign checks, okay? These kids with disabilities, they can't write those campaign checks. And that's why it all comes back to this.
I have an on-topic question about the bill, Senator Klobuchar in particular. I see a lot of different reforms in here, but one of them is not eliminating the Electoral College. Senator Warren and some of the 2020 candidates have called for that. Where do you personally stand on that particular?
You know, I'm happy to look at this, but I think if we really want to change our politics, what we've got to do is get the dark money out of our politics. And that's what this does. And I think you see strong unity in the Democratic Party on this bill. And so this is the bill that I think we should use as our talking points across the country when people are running for president or running for Congress. This is the whole collection of what we need to do, from taking the dark money out to making it easier to vote.
Already said that he's not going to allow a vote on this bill. Is he able to completely block votes on the bill to over parts of it? And also, why do you think he doesn't want to have a vote?
First of all, I think I said that the special interests, K Street folks, the lobbyists, they're terrified of this. They've gone to Senator McConnell. My understanding is when it came over from the House, Don McGahn, who left the White House and went to a big lobbying firm, came to their caucus the next day as the bill, the For the People Act, was headed over, to warn every single Republican, we don't want you to get on this bill, get near this bill, vote for this bill. And so, first of all, it's about the special interest. And I think you're asking too, how do we get a vote under the budget resolution? If they move forward with a budget resolution, which is supposed to be part of the process, that you have budget committee hearings and you come forward, you get many, many votes with a budget resolution on the floor. And the final thing, and Amy's involved in this is going into the people at the national election. This will be a defining moment in our democracy when you have all the Democrats in the House and the Senate and our presidential candidates talking about reform and them talking about the status quo.
Yep.
Yeah, please, Jeff, go ahead.
So let's turn the clock back to 2014. We had Citizens United, we had the Koch brothers deciding to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in Senate races across this country. And certainly the Koch brothers came to my race in Oregon, spent millions of dollars. But they also went to Iowa and North Carolina. They went to Louisiana and Arkansas. They went to Colorado and Alaska. That moment of that dark money, that powerful, wealthy money being spent, put Mitch McConnell in the role of majority leader. Mitch McConnell would not be the leader of this body, was it not for that dark money. So his power is premised on the corruption of our Constitution. No wonder he's 100% against restoring the vision on which we were founded.
So it's a wrap.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
all very much. Now on to the fight for this.